We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Show Me the Money Club. You can see quite a few people here. So we're going to get into everybody, what this all is, because we have a very interesting topic today for you guys. You might notice I'm not in my normal spot. I'm actually out of state. So coming here, hanging out with everybody. We're going to do a really great show. So again, Show Me the Money Club on the Rideshare guy, Sergio, myself, Chris. And we also have special guests today. We have Nicole Moore of RDU. We have Brian Dolber, who is the author, or one of the authors of this study that has Lyft drivers in California making $6.20. So we're having him on to be able to discuss more of that. We have Tyler and Walt. Walt, is from Seattle. Seattle-based driver, and Tyler is one of the drivers who participated in this study. Thank you guys for coming on. Sergio, if you want to kick it off.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Well, we appreciate you showing up, obviously. So we've been setting this up with Nicole. I've been setting this up with Nicole for 3 weeks now, and then, of course, the news last week hit from the Department of Labor, which made this more timely than ever. So we did not have any inside information. Uber and Lyft probably did, but we did not. So, so to me, it's like this couldn't be more timely, number one. Number two, as I said from the start of Show Me the Money Club, we are here to inform, educate drivers, and sometimes entertain. You got to have a sense of humor in all this. But today, we're not here for a debate. What we are here for is, put forward certain point of views that actually are really, really relevant and important in today's gig economy. And once we do that, I'm going to ask some questions, obviously. I'm going to maybe act like a little bit of a skeptic here. But to me, the most important thing is for our audience to make up their own minds. And I think with this kind of panel, if you did not make up your own mind who you are, if you want to be an employer and an independent contractor, then maybe it's time for something else. I'm not sure. So with all that said, ladies first, everybody introduce themselves. Start with Nicole.
I'm Nicole Moore. I part-time driver in Los Angeles.
And the president of RDU.
Yeah, I'm supposed to say that. I know.
But
it's not about me. It's about the crew.
I got
20,000 drivers around the state have joined up, and that's really why it matters at all.
Okay. So next we'll go to Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Dolber. I'm a professor of media and communication studies at California State University, San Marcos, and I've been working with Rideshare Drivers United for about 4 years. I'm also a former part-time Uber and Lyft driver.
Super. And let's go to Tyler.
Hey, my name is Tyler Varela-Rivas. I'm a part-time driver now, ex-full-time driver, up to 8 years now. Single dad with 2 daughters, and I work the graveyard shift.
There you go. Drunk hours. All right. And last but not least, Walt.
Hey, yeah, I'm Walt. I'm a Uber and Lyft driver. I started back in Washington, D.C. back in 2015, and then moved out to Washington State in 2016, and been doing it off and on, but when I'm doing it full time. And I'm a member of the drivers union here in Seattle, and we've been fighting for drivers' rights and trying to, see if we can make this viable.
Cool. We're going to get to your segment probably once we're done with everybody else. If you guys want to hang out the rest of the show, you're more than welcome to. If you have other things to do, which I understand, you want to leave, especially Nicole, because she's taking her lunch break in her car and joining us, right? That's a late lunch break, Nicole.
Hey, I have to work it.
Yeah, I know. You're the best. Thank you.
I'll just go on a hike and come back in a bit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, don't get eaten by bears or anything like that. We just found you, so we don't want to lose you right away. So hang out for about. Okay, so there was a study done about a month ago, I would say now, maybe a little bit less. This was a study that got major mainstream media play, right? We talked about it actually 3 weeks ago on one of our episodes, and we did a couple of short videos about it. But what better way to ask one of the authors of the study than Brian, who was one of the authors, and he'll mention, I'm sure, who gets the rest of the credit for the study. So I'm going to ask him, quickly, or, as well as he could, to explain what the study was, which was, the headlines that we saw was, well, our Uber driver is only making $6.20 an hour. So Brian, you go ahead, floor is yours. Explain to us how you started the study, what was involved, and how you came up with the conclusion of $6.20 an hour.
Yeah, sure. So my co-authors are with PolicyLink, which is a nonprofit research think tank based in San Francisco. And we collaborated alongside RDU to collect data from drivers in real time. And so one of the things I really want to emphasize is this is why this study is so important and so different and interesting from most of the studies that we see about driver pay. Rather than relying on data from the companies, which we see these studies from time to time. I think the most recent one said that drivers are making $35 an hour, right? But the authors of those studies are relying on data being provided from Uber in order to make those determinations. What we did is we used an app called the Driver Seat app, designed by the Driver Seat Cooperative, which basically looked at what data was being collected by Uber and by Lyft from drivers as they did their work. And from that, we were able to ascertain the mileage, the amount of time, and the pay that drivers received for that work. And so, I know that there's a lot of eyebrows being raised about the $6.20. Like, where does that come from? And we don't dispute that, drivers may feel like they're earning a decent amount of money because what we saw was that the gross pay, right, for the drivers who participated in the study was $26.30 an hour, right? So Uber may say $35 an hour, but when they say that, I think they're going by Prop 22 rules. They're saying that this is for engaged time, right? But we believe at RDU, and we think that most drivers understand their own time as the time that they're in the car, the time that they have their app on, right? So when we look at that, it's $26.30. But what that $26.30 doesn't take into account is then what we deducted within the study, right? And so we looked at the taxes that drivers are paying as independent contractors. We looked at the benefits that are lost that employers typically pay into, and the amount of time, like pay time off and sick time, that employers are allowed, that, with the loss of that safety net, drivers have to figure out a way to pay for that time on their own if they get sick, if they're unable to drive for whatever reason. And then the biggest deduction that we took into account is the depreciation of the vehicle, right? And so a lot of folks say, well, I'm paying for gas up front and it's not, this IRS rate of, 58 cents or now, as inflation's happened this year, 61 cents a mile that the IRS gives for reimbursement to employees. But what we have to keep in mind is if you're driving for any length of time, as anybody knows, something's going to go wrong with your vehicle, right? And so the costs that we're taking into account are not immediately felt by the driver. You may think that you're getting $26 in cash an hour, but there are deferred costs, right? Taking care of yourself and taking care of your vehicle that are not taken into account. And so when we look at that, plus the taxes that you have to pay out later, that's when we realize that drivers are actually making below the federal minimum wage. And the average driver in this study was at $6.20 an hour. And there was not a lot of variation within that, right? Drivers are basically settling in around that $6.20.
Right. So, I mean, one of the most important things that I've been saying for years and years is that the lack of education of the driver. I mean, a lot of drivers get out there with a daily goal in mind. And then, when I talk to them, they go, I made $100 today. I'm like, well, no, you did not make $100 today. You grossed $100 today, but then consider your expenses, what is your net? And they don't even understand the question. So that is really whatever study comes out, obviously it's going to be looked at with some skepticism, right? And to me, the skepticism that this study got, you know, at first it got my attention, obviously the headline, but then, you know, when I mean, you put in, I think it was 55 drivers, right? That they were involved in the study, and you collected data for 12,000 trips for about a 1 month period, correct? Okay, so, you know, to me, that kind of, as far as sample size, you know, I don't think that's that big of a sample size, but let's take that it is, right? And the $26.30 that you came up with was for online time, right? I'm assuming it's not active time like Uber does. Well, you know, Uber does that, or Lyft does that, or all gig companies use active time, is because, you know, we interviewed the CEO of Uber. He said, look, we don't know what you're doing. You know, you could be multi-apping, you could be doing other things, although your utilization factor may be 60%. You know, we're not going to pay you for 40% of the time that you may be on Lyft, or you may be on DoorDash, or you may be on Instacart, right? So I get that point. But when you come with the deductions, like, you know, when I first read it, I was like, no way, I'm making $6.20. Because personally speaking, I know what my costs are per hour when I'm running my car. And for each individual, it's a different number. If you're driving electric, it's different. If you're driving a hybrid, it's different. If you're driving a gas guzzler, it's different. If you're driving a 10-year beater, it's completely different, like a Prius, 10-year Prius. So how did you guys come up with those true, like, vehicle expenses? Besides, we'll talk about the healthcare and paid time off and all that stuff later. But what kind of vehicle was used for those deductions?
Well, the vehicle expenses we use the IRS rate.
Okay,
so
the mileage deduction.
Right, exactly. So so the 58 cents a mile, which now is 61 cents a mile. At the time that we did the study, we used the rates that were applicable during that time period. And you know, there's going to be variation depending on your vehicle, but that's, you know, sort of the most accurate and generalizable number that, you know, that we can find, and that's what were drivers' employees, what they would be due in terms of reimbursement.
Right. Okay. So one of the skepticism, after I read the article actually 3 times just to get an idea of what's going on. You know, you know, besides the cost of running a car, which we all know, gas depreciation, wear and tear, all that good stuff, which most drivers keep ignoring. Really, I don't even know why, but they are for some reason or another. So when RDU or Brian, yourself, or anybody actually in the gig economy who's involved on one side of the opinion or the other, what do you guys compare? Because in order for you to deduct for all the expenses, such as healthcare and paid time, sick time, and paid time off, and you know, retirement and all the good stuff, right? How I want to make an apples to apples comparison. Like, what should we compare an Uber Lyft driver to? Should we compare it to someone who's standing at Walmart for $18 an hour who doesn't have any of those benefits? Or should we compare him to like a UPS driver who has all the benefits and gets paid $25 an hour? What are we doing here? Like, because to me, like, the most important thing is, yes, you can deduct all those benefits that an employee would have under certain circumstances, because we know in retail today, if you're working at, you know, most retail places, let's say Walmart, Costco may be a little bit different, but I'm talking major Target, you know, you don't have health benefits. Most of the time, they're not going to make you work 40 hours a week for you to get those health benefits or the 401k or the retirement benefits. So I want to get a true comparison. That's what I think the article was missing. Like, what are we comparing an Uber and Lyft driver to? Are we seriously doing it like a UPS driver? Yeah, because they're both driving, delivering things, humans or packages. Or are we comparing it to a high-end job with full benefits, you know, at a company, let's say Costco manager? Who are we comparing these drivers to?
So the data that we used to figure out, you know, to break down these numbers, right, was based on what is legally due employees, right? So if you are a Walmart worker, you're entitled to the benefits that we enumerate in the study, right? Like the paid time off that you accrue this is specific to the state of California, right? That's California law says you get 10 minutes per every, I think, 3 hours that are worked. And so we use the California state minimum wage, right, to then calculate the value of that 10 minutes, and then multiplied it out for every driver based on the amount of time that they worked, and figured out how much they were owed, right? So yeah, I mean, we're not doing anything in this study that's like, you know, Cadillac plans of benefits. We're saying that this is the minimum of what employees working in the state of California are supposed to get. So like when we talk about the loss of a safety net for drivers, this is kind of the best estimate that we can figure out of what drivers would need to pocket in order to make sure that they're okay, right? So
Right.
if you know, you get sick and you can't go, you know, drive on the road, how much do you need to have in reserve from the amount of time that you did drive to buy yourself out? Because that's basically what the state is doing and your employer is doing, you know, for most employees.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
besides all yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
I think, you know, what the state of California does, what labor rights, or as we say, employee rights, are supposed to do, is they're supposed to provide a safety net when things don't go perfect, right? So, you know, workers' compensation if you get injured on the job, unemployment if you get deactivated, or, you know, if there's a pandemic where they don't provide some kind of PUA. You know, these are the kinds of things that when things don't go well, there's a safety net for you. You know,
Okay.
right now as drivers, if you're not putting money away every month from your from what you're getting in, when that healthcare thing hits you, right? I have a good friend in Rideshare right now. She has to have surgery. She's going to be out for 6 weeks. She came to me. She said, "I'm going to lose my housing while I'm trying to recover from the surgery. I have to get this surgery or I die." Right? Like,
Right.
you know, like, so what do you do? Like I had a good week, right? I didn't have to buy new tires. My transmission was good. I didn't injure my back when I put the suitcase in. And got, you know, thank God I have my health. But we're gambling on that stuff. We all know when we get in the car, we're gambling to a certain extent. But the whole idea of labor rights, employment rights, is have a little bit of backup, no matter what kind of job you have, if you run into one of those things. And, you know, when we put ourselves out on, you know, to drive 40, 50 hours a week, we're setting ourselves up. Something's going to happen to our car. It's not just going to be gas and oil changes. We know that.
Well, I agree. I
Now
mean,
we
I
put
agree with that. I
for it.
agree with that. And that's when, you know, I talked about the education part of the
Yeah.
equation, is that a lot of drivers don't save any of the money. I mean, if you're making the money, you got to save half of it at least, or for either a plan B, because this is not, look, you know, we all know. Do you know, Nicole, how many of your members are full-time drivers versus part-time drivers? Like out of 20,000 members, do you have an idea?
I mean, it's we probably have a higher percentage of full-time drivers that are part of RDU than are
Right.
part of the greater workforce. But there's a lot of people, you know, that just throw in a couple days a week for 3 months and they're still considered a driver, right?
Right.
So, but, you know, probably, I mean, those of us who drive really full-time, like Tyler here, like, we know what happens, and we drive the majority of miles as full-time drivers.
Oh, that's
right?
great. I mean, that's given, obviously, but you know, as we all know, I'll bet you your membership is probably running pretty close to the numbers that Uber and Lyft puts out as far as full-time versus part-time drivers, right? I mean, the 80-20 rule applies. 20% of the drivers give 80% of the rides, and then, you know, the rest of them, 80% of the part-timers give 20% of the rides. If you take those numbers and we apply it to your membership, you know, it's probably, you know, 20% of the 4,000 members probably are full-time drivers. Now, do you think, I understand, you know, the employee rights versus full-time versus part-time, but since this was put on years ago as put your side hustle on, it's not a full-time gig, it's not a career, you know, none of that stuff, all that was sold beautifully, right? And everybody said, oh yeah, the flexibility, freedom, you know, I'll just turn on the car and go and make some cash and whatever. But then, you know, in this study, I do understand how you can lower your $26.30 to $6.20, right? But do you think this applies to only full-time drivers or to everybody? Because a full-time driver's costs are going to be a lot higher versus you know, soccer mom driving 4 hours a week, right? So how do we come about that? Like, how do we find this happy medium that everybody should be employees if you're turning the car on and you're on the Uber or Lyft or DoorDash platform. I'm not sure that's going to fly, just for the fact that maybe for the 20% who are full-timers, grinders on the platforms doing 80% of the rides, maybe. But what do you think about that, Nicole or Brian or Tyler? I mean, should full-time drivers be treated as part-time drivers? Like everybody gets the same rights as far as these companies are concerned?
That's how the law treats you right now.
Okay.
Whether you work as an employee for 1 hour or 40 hours or 60 hours, you have the same rights.
Right.
Your employer has to put in for unemployment. Your employer has to put in for workers' compensation. So in that way you can have 3 or 4 app-based pieces of work. If we weren't misclassified, all that would be working into having real benefits, not having to pay self-employment taxes, having the employer put in for Social Security and stuff like that. I mean, all that stuff, it's there's like in America, we kind of don't understand what labor rights are. We think of employment as 9 to 5, structured in a shift, Monday through Friday, has to be full time. That's not actually what labor rights are. Labor rights are if you have a job and you don't have control of that job, you don't set your own pay, then you're supposed to have some rights to cover you because you're really not your own business person.
Right. So let me squeeze this quickly in here. That also part of the article blame Prop 22, right, for where the numbers are, and then that under Prop 22, drivers are actually losing their flexibility and freedom as opposed to anything else. Our audience, could you explain that to why that is, why you have that opinion, either Brian, Nicole, or anybody?
Well, so what the study shows is that as we went and spoke to drivers who participated in the interviews, or who participated in the study rather, what they repeatedly said was that they are having a harder and harder time making the same money that they used to, right? And that the tricks that they used in order to inflate their earnings and make as much money as possible are not working anymore, right? So and we saw this fairly blatantly, right, when once Prop 22 was passed, the apps took away many of the options in app that allow drivers information so that they could have more control over their work. And so after spending $220 million, right, and saying flexibility, be your own boss, yada yada, they then right when they got their law, that went away. And so drivers are really suffering because of that, and even more to the point now than before in some ways, don't feel like they have control. I mean, probably the biggest piece of control that you could have is over your wage, right? And if you're an independent contractor and a small business person, you set your prices. Obviously, that's not the case here, and they're lowering the prices, right? So,
no, I mean, I agree with that, Nicole. How about this? I mean, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but Tony West is kind of connected to the administration. So, do you think? I mean, we know what's happening all over the country now, right? We're getting upfront destination, first time in a decade, right? So, I mean, look, I talked about this all the time, and there's no downside of knowing where you're going. You know what I'm saying? There is absolutely no downside of that. Okay. So do you think they had a little bit of an inside thing saying that, because the kind of coincidence may be too much, right? The release of all over the country, basically, by the end of the year, Uber and Lyft both should have upfront destinations for drivers all over the country. Okay. Small city, big city, whatever it is, according to what their CEO said. So to me, are they doing this to just kind of circumvent what's coming, the building falling on them, or why are they doing this? Why do you think they didn't release this for 10 years and now they're going like, oh, look, that's all this information you want, you have it right there?
Tyler, I know you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought he was directing it to you, but yeah, no. The way we look at it is it finally broke. Like, we finally became that big enough that the labor laws found out about it, and we spoke to OSHA about it, and I even spoke in one of those, and that's what Nicole was getting at. And we let them know, like, hey, during COVID, they didn't provide masks. We had to provide our own things. So now it became a safety thing on a human being at that point versus just, hey, you're working and everything. And during the pandemic, it was just like, hey, well, good luck. You guys figure it out how you want. So just recently, they started slowly giving you extra things. And by giving you, I mean, they gave you discounts. They didn't say, here, the mask. It's more like, hey, here's a discounted price on being able to provide you some masks. And then if you do want them, because I actually try to get some, they're like, come pick them up way over here. And I'm like, I got to drive how far? And I drive graveyard, like I mentioned to you guys. So I'm sleeping most of the day, like, or even right now, I'm barely waking up type deal, you know? So when it came to that,
I wasn't asking you that. Why do you think they're releasing the destination of the passenger now? Do they want to make us look like half independent? Is that what they want to do?
No, man, they're trying to lower the prices.
No,
Bingo!
No. You know what? We actually hold on. We're actually going to need your help, your members' help, Nicole, because we're going to run our own test, right? And what better way to run it than with a bunch of drivers and passengers? We do understand, there's a two-sided market, and the algorithms are set up to take advantage of both sides, period. There is no ifs and buts about that, okay? Lowering the rates will come, with testing certain things, and thousands of rise later. You run a spreadsheet and you put your mile and minute rates, which they took away now, versus the new rates that the algorithm is figuring out in a millisecond, figuring out 70 different things. My suspicion is, I said about this upfront fares and destination, it's boiling the frog slowly. So nobody will figure it out. In fact, we did a Uber math last weekend. We did a math lesson. We figured if Uber takes a dime, just a dime on top of what they're taking now, because last quarter they did 1.875 billion trips in one quarter. A dime is $187.5 million. In the 4 quarters, that's $750 million. This is just a dime. We're not talking about dollars. We're not talking about, quarters. I mean, figure the numbers out, right? So this is going to be their way to profitability because the algos are so good now. And, they're going to squeeze a dime and nickel, a nickel here, 25 cents there, and then there goes their profit. That's how they're going to be profitable. But if, how about this? If they were to release this, okay, now we see the destination without any restrictions. Okay, you can decline 1,000 trips in a row. Well, some parts of the country, they're turning your app off already. We're getting news of that. But, let's say this goes on. And tomorrow, miracles of miracles happen, and they go, okay, now you guys are full independent contractors. You name your price for the trip. What would you guys say to that? Then would that make us independent contractors? Because then we can sit there and put a price on a trip, and if it's too high, then we'll go hungry for a couple of days, but we'll adjust like any other independent contractor would. What would happen? Would you guys take that deal?
The inevitable result of that would be what happens if you try to buy a used book on Amazon and everybody has their automated pricing system to drop it to 25 cents below the next person. And before you know it, it takes about 5 or 6 days and the book costs 1 cent. So we'll bid each other down to unsustainable levels.
Right.
Because there's always going to be one person who's thinking just cash flow, who's going, well, that's more than the price of gas, so I'll take it.
Right. So, they tested that, by the way, when AB5 came around before Prop 22, and then every driver was out down bidding each other to the point that I was like, well, might as well do it for a fee. I'm just like, I called it Hunger Games at the time. It was like that wasn't even funny. So
you're left with a choice of making no money or making unsustainable money.
Yeah. No, I get you. So in a perfect world, right? RDU and a lot of drivers on your camp want employment rights on top of, the flexibility and freedom. Do you think that's feasible, guys?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. Like the way most people talk about this, they talk about like we want to remain independent contractors. And I just want to be clear that there's no remaining anything. We're not independent contractors. We are not building our own business. Lyft won't even match me more than 3 times with the same customer because it's not, they don't want me to build my own business. So, so this whole way that they frame this question, do we want to remain independent question, is more like the way you said, which, what if they did give us the ability to set our own prices and, we didn't get in trouble when we canceled or, all that stuff, right? I think that's a completely different business model than the companies are looking at. They gave us a little multiplier. It wasn't even the same as setting our own prices, right? That was before 22. So what I would say is it's not that we want to, we can't remain an independent contractor because we've never been given that choice. They've always set up the whole thing. The algorithms have so much control over us. They game us. They know what our goal is. They'll stretch us out to stay on the road as long as our goal is, all that stuff. So do we want to become employees? It's like we're already treated like employees. The only difference is our phone is yelling at us instead of a boss over our shoulder, right? And so we deserve those rights, right?
Okay. Yeah, I get you that, but you do realize that, this is going to be an uphill fight. I mean, these companies, right? I mean, they're trying to protect. It is what it is, close to just between Uber and Lyft, $60 billion worth of market capitalization, right? I mean, they're not going to go away and lay down and say, yeah, everybody become employees, wear your Uber shirt and Uber hat, go out there and accept every trip, work your 8-hour shift and then go home. And they have the ability to do that. Nicole, you know what happened in New York City, right? I mean, they came with minimum wage laws and some benefits, and not everybody can turn their app on and go on to the platform anytime they want.
But guess what? They also have a strong union there, and they fought back on that stuff. Yeah, you can't turn your app on in the middle of a field in upstate New York and get paid minimum wage, right? But when you're in the city of New York and you take a ride with Uber, they pay you the unoccupied time that the market shows out. So like for 40% of your time is basically your car is going to be empty. Even if you're waiting at Dodger Stadium or whatever, you get paid for that time. And people, they have, the thing is in New York City, they have strong regulation and enforcement from government entity, taxi and limousine commission, right? And they've have very strongly regulated, and they enforce the rules. They did not let Lyft and Uber operate in New York City without giving them the data. So they were able to look at the big data. They didn't have to find 55 drivers to drive around for a month. They had the data, right? Like our state needs to get the data, right? But what they were able to tell was that drivers were making less than minimum wage in every way they sliced the numbers, and they could. And so they said, we need to bring folks up to minimum wage plus expenses. So that's when they instituted the $25 for all time worked. The way it works is when you take that Uber ride, you get 40% of your time tacked on that you get paid hourly. Plus you're still getting bonuses and the surges and stuff like that as they're available.
Right.
But
as an
average, the drivers used to be making $11 to $13 an hour. And now they're making $17 to $19 an hour average after expenses, right? And then they're fighting right now because they have a strong organization, New York Taxi Workers Alliance, that is fighting for a raise. They're going to get like a $5 to $7 buck bump up. And so they'll be making 30 to 32 gross guaranteed, not just on a good night.
I know, but this model is not being followed or repeated throughout the country. Why do you think that is? Is it because the local legislatures are just bending over to Uber and Lyft, or why is that? Why is this happening?
I mean, our governor here in California told us that labor should bend over to work with the industry. There's a lot of people that are, kind of sucked up into this. They want the cheap prices, they want, Uber and Lyft to support their political campaigns, but that doesn't mean it's right.
No, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not. No, I'm not saying it's right. But what I'm saying, I'm trying to find out that, look, I know these companies are not going to go away and just, say, okay, everybody become employees, whatever. That's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. They're going to fight tooth and nail, even if their stocks go to zero. All the way there, they're going to fight. Okay. They've been fighting this for years. So is RDU or the employment model? I mean, both companies are saying, and a lot of analysts that follow these companies are saying that if that model became nationwide, the employee model, everybody became employees, it would raise their cost 30 to 50%, which it may be a little bit too high for me, but let's say it does. And, typically what companies do is pass it on to the passengers, right? I mean, they're not going to do anything else with it. And as we know, Uber and Lyft raised the rates for passengers between 30 and 60% nationwide anyway, before even any of this happened, because they call themselves, immune to inflation. They can raise the prices, but then we're not going to pay the drivers, the same increase that we charge the passengers. So if this were to happen, right, if everybody became employees and these companies, they say it's a total threat to our existence, and you know what, they disappeared, right? Because there are a couple of companies out there like Alto, right? You guys know, I'm sure. They own their cars. They're a vertically integrated company. They're all employees. They hire employees, right? They have benefits. They have, I've spoken to a few Alto drivers. They're not that happy being employees, to be honest with you. I don't know if you've spoken to them. I've spoken to the CEO. He came up with this higher end model of rideshare with on schedules and whatever, but they're all employees. They don't, they give you the car, they give you the gas, they give you everything. You just show up and work for $20 an hour and some benefits. And to me, it's like, we do surveys, and that. In fact, again, no coincidence. We did a survey on our channel, got over 1,500 votes, which I know is not a big number. So the survey had 4 choices. 1 was independent contractor, 2 employee, 3 a hybrid, and 4 was show me the money. So independent contractor got 63% of the vote, 9% was employee, 10% was a hybrid of sort, and 18% or 17% was, or 18% was show me the money. Meaning smart drivers are out there, they can do whatever they do, multi-app, whatever they do, and they hustle, and then they make themselves $3,000 a week. I meet them all the time, but not everybody is going to be able to do that. So why do you think that is, Nicole or Tyler or Brian or Walt, anybody? Why is there this notion when we do survey after survey that practically 70% of drivers or gig economy workers want to stay independent? Are they misinformed? Are they drinking Kool-Aid, too much Uber Kool-Aid? What's happening here? What's going on here, right? Why is that? I mean, because it's a huge number. 70% is not a small number.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part of it is that there's a misconception that, I'm hearing a little bit, as we're talking, which is that employee means scheduled. Right. And employee doesn't mean scheduled. Right. And Nicole was kind of pointing to this earlier that by law, right, absent of Prop 22, right, and even absent of AB 5, because this is what the courts in California had determined, and this is what most courts throughout the United States are saying, and most courts throughout the world are saying, is that the way that these companies are structured, the workers are employees under the definition of law, and that has nothing to do with scheduling. And so that means that you can remain an employee and not have to go onto a schedule and give up that flexibility, right, that drivers are saying that they feel like they're losing anyway as they're being squeezed by the rates. So
yeah, I get your point, and I do follow all the news around the globe. Obviously, their laws and the way they look at labor is a little different in Europe than in Australia, maybe, than they are here. It also depends, obviously, who's in charge over there. But we're here. We're in the U.S. So under your assumption, Brian, saying that schedules don't apply to employees, we don't have to have a schedule. What employee anywhere can just go to a job? And I'm just being a skeptic. I'm not trying to squeeze you or anything else. Mm-hmm. Like I go to, I work at Costco. I go to Costco. 3 hours later, I go, I don't feel like working anymore. I clock out and go home. Would they let you do that?
Well, there are employees who are on flex time, and they're W-2 employees, right? I mean, as a professor, I have a very flexible schedule, right? I'm a W-2 employee, right? So I'm just saying that there's nothing about the legal classification of being an employee that butts up against having a flexible schedule. So drivers don't have to lose that. If drivers were to lose that with a move towards employment classification, that's on the companies, right? And then that's something that drivers could continue to fight for, to have a more flexible schedule. But there's no reason in saying that that we have to lose flexibility by having the benefits of employment.
Okay. Nicole, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, what Brian said, and, I mean, I can say that any worker in America, whether you're driving a car on an app or whether you're working at Walmart or working in construction, people need more flexibility. We have to fight for that as a nation, because it's, people have to be able to pick up their kids. They have to be able to do those things. And again, what Ryan said is true. You can, we're still going to try to work to chase the searches, to chase the bonuses and those kinds of things. That's how Lyft and Uber's model is. That's how they schedule people. Like, I knew I had to work Friday night and Saturday night. It didn't make any sense to work Tuesday morning. Like, I knew that. That's how they scheduled me, right? So it's a different kind of scheduling. But like, my day job is in healthcare. Some people, right, they're scheduled down with pencil on a, piece of paper. And some people, it's an algorithm in the computer. We're not different, though. We're doing the same kind of work, right? So, this is really about how we're scheduled, and they incentivize their schedule really well. They have a lot more drivers on Friday night than they do Tuesday morning, and we follow it.
Look, the
follow
information.
The money.
I agree with that. I mean, the information advantage that they have over the passenger and the driver is immense, right? The asymmetric information advantage these companies have, because they're basically data banks. I mean, they know everything about the passenger. They know everything about the driver, probably more than the driver knows about himself or herself. So they know the tendencies, what rides they accept, what hours they tend to work, what bonuses will trigger them for them to work. Obviously, this is what the workforce is becoming these days. But the 70% that exists today that all want to say, oh, no, I don't want to be an employee. I don't want any of those rights. I want to pay off my own health care. I want to take care of my retirement. They're all saying this. I mean, look, we did a couple of episodes. Unequivocally, it was like overwhelming majority said, I see. I'm saying, what are these people missing? Are they really drinking this much Uber Kool-Aid, or what are they missing?
I think that 70%, it has a number of different groups of people. You have some of those who are the part-timers who are just cherry picking Friday and Saturday nights and making $60 gross an hour and thinking, hey, this is just great, and I don't want to lose this, and because again, you're 20/80. Of that 80%, some of them are just cherry picking. A lot of them are probably cherry picking the better times. The whole system wouldn't work if everybody was just cherry picking the whole time. So to us, 20%, we're necessary for it to flow. So we have to find out a way to make it sustainable throughout the whole, all the periods of time. Right. But beyond just the successful people, you also have a lot of people who just aren't thinking beyond their current cash flow. And so how much gas am I paying? How much money am I paying? So week in, week out, I'm making cash, so I'm good. And they don't see that they're mortgaging their future when the car eventually breaks. I just had to pay $6,000 for a head gasket blown, and that was painful. But when you're putting 80,000 or more miles on your car, you really have to factor in depreciating from a full car with all of the expenses to absolutely nothing in 3.5 years or so. And people, when you don't factor in that, well, then the job looks really good. And so I wouldn't want to give up what looks really good. But again, it's not until after you get burned that you start to see, oh, wow, this wasn't sustainable. And so part of it is the education piece and helping more people understand the exact true cost of doing the job. And some people really, don't want to. They just want to, the way I think of it is it's either desperation or ignorance. And desperation often leads to ignorance because, I got to pay the bills right now.
I mean, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I first started driving, excuse the language, shits and giggles, I would make $60 an hour, and $3,000 a week was no problem for me. I mean, nothing, right? And then fast forward 6 years later, even forgetting inflation, right? and I'm in LA. I'm probably the best market to be in for rideshare. And I can hardly crack $30 an hour. This is online time, not active time, right? So, and my expenses obviously have gone through the roof last 3 years, which is it's not being adjusted for, obviously. So granted, right? I mean, the numbers are going down, but then with Uber's churn and burn attitude, right? Because they just want to replace the driver, and there's another one, 10 more are about to join. One burns and 10 more is about to join, because that's been their marketing for the last, 10, 12 years, right? They don't care who they're burning and churning. There's 10 more to replace. That's why the average of an Uber driver or Lyft driver is 8 months to 10 months. That's it. They quit and then they go do something else. Because nowadays, I call it doing rideshare with the costs the way they are, with the expenses that drivers have. I call it like taking basically an equity loan on your car, on the remaining equity of your car, to pay your short-term bills. And then 6 months later, when your car is shit, excuse me language again, you have nothing left, right? Now it is that. But 6-7 years ago, so we have to look what was so good 6-7 years ago, and we know what's so bad today. We know that. Yeah. So what was so good 6-7 years ago that we cannot duplicate? And to me, I'm like, I spoke to you, Walt, for about an hour the other day, right? And you talked to me about stuff, and I want you to basically repeat that conversation. I go, honestly, I did not find one thing wrong with what you said, but then maybe I'm naive. Maybe I didn't read you for an hour. But what is the downside? What is the downside of the Seattle model? And explain that, what it is, to start with, for our viewers and everybody else, because I thought, it was like a win-win-win situation. I'm like, it's the first time I said that, win-win-win. Okay. Maybe Nicole will disagree, or Brian or Tyler, because she knows about the Seattle situation and as well as the New York situation, because those are the two cities that kind of had the balls to go against these companies and create some laws to protect drivers. So I'm like, LA, I don't know. I'm like, LA is the biggest Uber market. Man, have some balls and do something here, But anyway, so go ahead, Walt. Tell us what you got.
I think what used to be good primarily was they were pumping enough money into the system that it didn't matter whether, we had downtime, or it didn't matter whether we also had high expenses, because we were making enough gross to cover all that and more. Now, a lot of people would just squander it, but, if you have enough money, you can overcome almost anything in general. And so that whole system changed back in 2016 when they split us from getting a percentage of the ride to now we get per mile and per minute, and the passengers get charged whatever the market will bear. And when that happened, it was about a 35% pay cut across the board for everybody, which would have had us all go with the pitchforks and gone fighting, but for the fact that they suddenly instituted all these bonuses and promotion deals that were, we didn't feel the pain equally. So we didn't, a lot of people didn't understand what was going on. And back then I was screaming, hello, the whole point of this was that when they shift it from a base wage scale to bonuses and promotions, they can then say, oh, well, you're not entitled to that bonus. This is extra. And so year after year, they chipped away at that and chipped away at that. So even pre-pandemic, all those were pretty much gone. And so we were getting back all the way down to the 35% pay cut, which was not sustainable when you look at the big picture. So what Seattle ended up doing was originally, they wanted to copy the New York model and put it on here and say, well, look, it looks good for New York, so let's do it. And a number of us drivers said, slow down. New York's a very different entity than Seattle, and every area has different needs. So the New York rates weren't going to work for us here. New York has like 15 hours of rush hour a day. Most of us are only like 5 or 6 hours of rush hour. So it's a lot less on time here than it is in New York. In New York, you might go four blocks and it takes 20 minutes. So you better pay them for their time more. Out here, some of our rides are short, but we also have a lot more longer rides. So the mileage is a bigger piece of that. So what we did was we put a hold on the rush to copy New York so that we can say, look, we're good for labor. And we just did what New York did and said, either give us these numbers, which they were much higher than what we ended up getting, or do a study that actually shows how much we're making, how much we're spending, and what do we need to make in per mile and per minute minimums, so that most of us are going to make significantly more than the minimum wage. And, you might have a couple people who are below if they're just staying out in the middle of nowhere, sitting at home all day, hoping to get a ride. But for the most part, by bumping the money up, we've now created a system that is sustainable. And so we moved the rates up, like next year, they're going to be 150 per mile and 64 cents per minute in Seattle. And then statewide, we finally expanded it. So starting in January, rather than the much lower rates, it'll be 37 per minute and 127 per mile. And at these rates, you can make enough money to overcome a lot of the shortfall.
So hold on a second. So
yeah, go
ahead. So because when we were talking, you said you even made a deal to adjust for inflation, that the rates would go up,
yes.
Right? So
yeah, and that's why I'm reading you next to the numbers for 2023 are a little higher than where we are right now, because we're getting about an 8.
Well, we're almost there. Give me the numbers for 2023.
2020, that's what I gave you.
Ballpark.
2023, the exact numbers as the labor and industry came out with. It's 64 cents per minute and 150 per mile in Seattle, and 37 cents per minute and 127 per mile outside of Seattle and the rest of the state.
64 cents a minute?
64 cents per minute.
That's more than we get paid in LA for mileage. We get paid 60 cents
which is ridiculous. Because if you're getting paid 60 cents per mile, you can never make money.
Okay,
because you're not getting paid for all your miles. Go ahead.
Hold on. 64 cents a minute. Last time I checked, there were 60 minutes in an hour, and I don't think that's going to change. So, what is that? Is that like $38 an hour? Or?
It's like 38-ish. Yeah.
Are you effing kidding me? I feel so bad for LA drivers. Nicole, why are you driving still? What the heck is going on? So, and $1.50 a mile. That's like a candy. That's like cherry on the cake. You guys. Okay.
Really, that's what we were making before the big change. I was making 80% of about $1.87-ish a mile, and the per minute it was a lot lower actually. But the per mile part, we're just kind of recovering back to where we were in the good old days in 2015 when the rates were much higher in Washington State and also back in Washington, D.C. I know other places in the country have always been low. And I talk to drivers and they're making 60 cents a mile. And I'm like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, exactly.
They say, some days it's good. No, it's not.
We did a show on that. And we put all the major cities in the country. Like there are cities actually that are less than 60 cents. And there are some like at 62 cents. Basically, Uber's rates before this upfront shenanigans came around with the double algo and how they squeeze the drivers here and there, it was down to 60 cents, basically the IRS deduction. So I always tell drivers, I go, how do you expect to make money if your IRS deduction is more than what they're paying you? So I'm like, if you're doing it for a tax break, maybe wear your car out for a deduction. But other than that, I don't see a point in doing it. So $1.50
the per trip.
You must be
profitable. Go ahead.
Are you profitable at $1.50 and 64?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
But the money alone wasn't the only piece of it. We also, as the drivers union got together and saw that lots of drivers were getting deactivated because they were getting rear-ended in traffic, and some drivers were getting deactivated when their car was parked and they got hit. Because again, the system just doesn't care about us. We're disposable, just throw it out and get a new one. So we established first in the nation deactivation rights where they have to be able to show just cause, and there's an arbitration process that the state provides as an option, or that we could take the forever wait 10 months arbitration process that Uber and Lyft give us. Either way, however, they have an incentive to get it done quickly because now we're eligible for back pay all the way back to the point where they deactivate us based on our previous income. So we've got that protection. And then we also now have sick leave, where we're coming in at 1 hour per every 40 at the rate that you are earning when you have a butt in the back seat. So effectively, the 40 hours of having a passenger earns you 1 hour of earning at the rate when you had a passenger. And then also workers' comp eligibility has gotten thrown into the mix as well. So these things are possible if you are able to have the political will, or you have the drivers get together through a union or something. But unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all. A lot of places are not going to be able to get their local government or their state government to go along with this maybe certain areas think, oh my gosh, or government regulations are bad. They're screwing all of us, and not really caring. And then you also have a lot of drivers who, again, aren't fighting for this because they don't see how they're not making money.
Okay.
How they'd be better off sweeping the street.
Yeah, I get that. I say that to a lot of drivers. I go, time for a W-2, right? I mean, look, it doesn't make sense. If you don't understand numbers, don't drive. So, Walt, I mean, are you part of a union up there?
Yeah, Drivers Union in Seattle. I've been involved with them ever since I moved back into the area in 2018, but I think around 2014 is when the state passed a law effectively allowing us to collectively bargain for wages, which normally we wouldn't be allowed to do because of antitrust law, which is one of the two big laws that Uber and Lyft have been using as a weapon to screw us. They use antitrust and contract and basically try to establish this situation where all of their money comes on us and they don't have to act like they're a company that does big stuff, and all of the power goes to them.
Right. I mean, so is it the union that takes care of, because one of the biggest problems, obviously, safety and unjust deactivations for drivers, which has been going on forever. Yeah. Do you know anybody that got reactivated through this process of yours?
Absolutely. Well, we have the unions providing not just protections against deactivations, and I just checked with the office. They were saying about 15 or so a week come in with deactivation issues. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I know we have had several reactivations. And part of that is because we provide the representation for you when you go to these hearings. We provide assistance with both the deactivation issues and also with the average parking ticket, because we know 3 strikes and you're out on a moving violation. And so if you have one of those, a lot of drivers don't know that if you have a lawyer, they can plea it down to a broken taillight, and suddenly, boom, it's not something that's going to cause you to lose your job. And so we provide that representation to drivers as one of the the benefits of being a member of the union. And quite honestly, it's a benefit that's provided to anybody who walks in there, because we're not going to turn you away.
Well, I mean, look, this is not cheap to do. Okay, I mean, you're talking legal representation, all this. Who pays for this? Does the passenger pay for it? Is there a tax for it, or is there a membership fee? How does it work?
There's about, I think now it's about 15 cents per every ride is going into the fund for the driver, whatever they call it, representation union type thing, the Driver Resource Center. And that is something that, again, we got the state to go for. Prior to that, Seattle had a 52-cent tax, which was for lots of different things, because the way we were able to get this passed was not just to have the drivers say, hey, fight for us. We combined with other interests. We've combined with the Public Transportation Institute. We've combined with the affordable housing advocates, and we all came together with a Fair Share Act that was, you scratch mine, I'll scratch yours, and together we will get this through city council and make it law. And that's something that, it's different in every city, but by doing things like that, we found a way to make it viable.
Well, okay, so as I said to you during our conversation, I didn't hear anything negative about this, which I would take this in a heartbeat if this was in LA. However, probably won't be, because, as you said, different layout, different rhythm of the city, whatever works in Seattle doesn't mean it could be copied all over the country, but it certainly could be copied in similar cities to Seattle. So, Nicole, Brian, Tyler, what's wrong with this picture? Do you guys not like what's happening in Seattle?
I mean, to understand this,
Tyler, you're a driver, Tyler. You don't like $1.50 a mile and 64 cents a minute, man?
No, dude, that's why I was even going to comment, but you guys kept jumping in it. I was going to bring it back to what you were saying with those drivers. Yeah. Ignorance is bliss, honestly, and that's what it is. I even told my buddy, get onto driver's seat, see your real numbers to see that your shift isn't working for you. You're not making enough to even cover this, or that. And he wouldn't. And for the longest, I was like, and I'm a pretty smart driver, I feel like. So when I hit my numbers, I try to beat what driver's seat proves, because obviously it's taking everything into account. And not only that, I actually do those things. I take out money for my 401k. I take away money for sick pay. I take away money for vacation. I actually do these extra things for myself, even for a car later on, because that's sadly what happened when I jumped in in 2014. I eventually killed my Camry. Now I have a 2016 Ford Fusion, and sadly, I mean, I made enough. I still was making those numbers, and I finally ended up paying it off 5 years later because that's what the contract was. But some of those drivers got a bigger contract, 72 months. So you're in there 6 more years with that payment. Luckily, the pandemic ended up hitting, and then I just started paying it off with my unemployment money. But when it comes to that, those 70% drivers you're talking about, I had to say it is my buddy. They just don't want to know the number. They don't want to know the truth. They think that money right then and there is cash money right here to use. But then back to that, your car. What's going to happen when your car's gone at that point?
Nicole, what's wrong with the Seattle model? I mean, not that I'm saying it could be duplicated in LA, right? Or any other city. What's wrong with that model?
So to know the industry, there's a couple of ways you have to go after the industry to get fairness for drivers. Okay. One is you have to have strong regulation, right? That's what we see in New York City. That's what Seattle did a long time ago and got, rates put in place that were more fair, right? You also have to limit the number of cars, because if your rates could be $7, a mile. But if you're only going to get one ride a week because there's 100,000 drivers competing for that same passenger, you can't do that, right? So you have to have good regulation, both on prices and then number of drivers, right? The other thing you have to have is you have to have a strong grassroots organization of drivers fighting for what they want, right? If you don't have that, people are going to make all kinds of decisions that aren't going to make sense, right? But I would say you have to have your rights under the law. The labor rights are a big deal. The drivers in New York City still have labor rights. They're still covered by unemployment. And as the state gets stronger on enforcement, they're going to be covered by all the other rights of employment with strong regulation. What folks did in Washington State was they gave up their employment rights for that. And I have to say, it is you want employment rights because you want to have at least a floor that every other employee has. But you also want the right to organize your own union and to fight for a contract that is legally enforceable. And those are the things that, you give those up when you give up labor rights. I know that there's some legislation in place that helps a little bit in Washington State, but that regulation we could do in California now without giving our employment rights up once we get the boot off of our neck called Prop 22, because Prop 22 makes it impossible for us to regulate. I mean, the LA City Council agreed with us that we should have at least $30 an hour minimum, and they voted to support that, only to have Prop 22 say, I'm sorry, municipalities cannot regulate this industry. It's only Prop 22. So we can't have laws like Prop 22. We have to maintain our labor rights. Otherwise, it's like having a house where you need a refrigerator. So you trade your house for the refrigerator. Now, where are you going to put your refrigerator? But the regulation that's going on in Seattle is good. It's not that different than the regulation that's going on in New York City, except they haven't given up their labor rights there.
Okay. So, let's segue into a few more minutes into the, breaking news last week, right? Department of Labor getting involved, and the Federal Trade Commission a couple of weeks before that, which we talked about on our show, saying that we're going to protect the gig workers, not specifically just Uber and Lyft drivers, but all gig workers, all the algos, the games that they're played, the bait and switch, the carrot and the stick, all that good stuff, right? So what weight, any of you can comment on this, what weight do any of you put into what's coming from the federal government, as opposed to, I do understand New York City is a specific case. Seattle, honestly, Walt, if I had your rates here, I would be swimming in cash, but I don't have it. So you basically have like about 70% of employee rights with ridiculously high rates, pretty much somewhere in that range. I'm kind of looking at it
closer to 80% or so, but
Okay. So what, Nicole or Walt or Brian, Tyler, anybody, the federal stuff, what's happening? What do you, how much hope do you have into anything coming out of that until, the elections, or what do you guys think is going to happen with that?
The federal government signaling that they believe that app-based workers are supposed to have full labor rights. That's what they're signaling. This particular rule is moving, therefore, in the right direction. But what it enforces is federal minimum wage and overtime, right? Federal minimum wage right now, what is it, $7.25, right? So, that's not that great, but it is moving in the right direction, and we should not sneeze at that, because next what comes is more rules. What comes is we would have to push for enforcement, and we actually need laws that protect us at the federal level. Not just rules. So I applaud it. It's not going to change much right now.
Okay. That's what I said. I mean, I don't think much is going to happen on the federal level. I think every city or state should do probably some of what Seattle is doing. Look, these companies want to exist, right? They don't want to disappear. I mean, if these companies, look, you may like Uber, Lyft, Instacart, DoorDash, none of these companies. If they all go out of business tomorrow, there's potentially millions and millions of people are going to lose their livelihood. I mean, that's a fact, right? I don't think any of you want these companies to disappear due to regulation or some other stuff, right? I mean, this is the new economy. We got to admit that. We can't just go, hell with Uber, somebody else will come and replace them. I'm not sure if that will happen. So we don't want these companies to disappear because most of our livelihoods depend on it. But we also have to make the point that we're at a point that like all of you agree, at 60 cents a mile and 20 cents a minute, we're losing money. I mean, a lot of drivers, they go, oh, I made $30 an hour. I'm like, yeah, you made $30 an hour with surge and at midnight, at drunk hours, and then it'll be like me being a good golfer. Yeah, I hit the 300-yard drive. It was downhill and there was like a hurricane blowing behind me. That's the only time that will happen. So to me, it's like, yeah, the fare cuts have been, draconian, obviously. But so, final question for all of you. Let's sit down. Let's consider me Uber and Lyft. We're at a table discussing. What do you guys want? What do you guys want out of this, Nicole? What do you want? And let me see if I can give it to you. I mean, I'm being serious right now. What do you want?
Raise. Let's get back to those higher numbers, even higher them because of inflation. Because like I mentioned to you back then, I mean, it was sustainable, kind of like how Walt's saying. Those numbers were, at least in LA, where my numbers were okay. But if you're telling me you cut mine to like less than half of that, that's a lot. And now the upfront ones, like from my numbers, they're taking about 61%. I gave a ride for $100. The guy was super curious about it. He was like, hey, how much are you going to get for this? I'm paying $102. I was like, really? Oh, I'm going to get $80 for this. Easy. And he's like, oh, let me see. We get there. Why does mine say $52? Do the math on that. If he paid 102, that's 61%. Uber just took off right off the top. Never saw it.
Yeah.
Other than the guy passenger just telling me about it when he paid.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Like, we can't educate passengers. There are 122 million of them, and they're all willy-nilly taking trips and ordering $30 burritos happily. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, if you want to do it, do it. But I'm like, hey, education. I think educating the driver is probably more important than educating the passenger that they're getting. Where both sides are getting ripped off, kind of.
Yeah.
But we're a driver-centric channel. So yeah, Nicole, RDU and Uber are sitting at the table. What do you guys want? Like, what is your model? What do you want? Because I don't want to disappear. I'm going to fight for my life until my last drop of blood. And I'm going to tie you up in court, and I'm going to mess with you all I want. And like, I'm not going to let you do what you want. But what can we compromise on? What can we agree on?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I think we have to even out the power a bit, which means drivers have to be really well organized. And, I speak for the organization that we're building, Rideshare Drivers United. We're building our own union. Our union's only as powerful as the people involved. And when we were able to really shut down the company, a couple days before their IPO back in 2019, that was a big deal. We cost them a ton of money. we have to get to that kind of place where we can cost them a lot of money. That's how we bring ourselves to the table. So it's not just bazillionaire Dara with us, but then we can move our agenda with them, right? Now, our agenda, drivers have been saying, in the surveys that we put out regularly, that they want better pay. They want, higher mileage and pay rates, but also a higher, lower commission. The commission has to be limited, just like you were saying, Tyler. We need protection from deactivation, stuff like, we need just cause and a due process, not just fire somebody because some
Passenger said something.
You got it, who's drunk or whatever, says he didn't like you, right? Like, we need those things. But that's the thing about building a union. It's democratic, and it's based on what the drivers want, what we negotiate at that table. And we'll have those fights, but we have to build our power, which is why we're building RDU and we're asking people to join us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Uber, I'm not going to give you that, right? I'm going to go somewhere where Walt is, and I'm going to say, look, I'm going to exist. Look, under their system, right? Again, LA is different. Every city is different. But I think if the legislatures in every city got involved to the depth of the Seattle legislatures and passed some laws protecting drivers like New York City is doing, I think as Uber, me, I'll be more willing to not fight to my last drop of blood. Okay? Because Seattle is a proof that unjust deactivations kind of go away, higher pay rates. Look, we do all our surveys. All our surveys mention three things. They were the same three things since 2016. Actually, they got, pay, number one, always. It's always an issue. I'm not making enough. I'm like, if you're not making enough, go find something else to do because you may not be good at this. Look, in every job, there's a 5% of people who excel, 5% who totally suck, right? Those I cannot help. But then there's an 90% in the middle who by education or whatever, you can incrementally improve to the next level, right? If you're making $20 an hour, maybe by education, you can move to 23 an hour, 25 an hour. But then if you have Seattle rates, right, which are pretty much, I think, 2016 rates in LA, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, your minute numbers are higher than what we had, probably ever, right? So back me up on that, Tyler. Is that right? Like in 2016, I think it was like
that's way higher.
$1.30 and like 40 cents a mile in LA, right? So fast forward 6 years, we're at 60 and 21. I'm like, for God's sakes, what the heck is going on here? So besides that, I think I'm not going to give you, the employee model, Nicole. I'm Dara. I'm not giving it to you, but I may give you what they have in Seattle, and I may even give you what they're doing in New York. But are you in this like all or nothing, Nicole? Is RDU in this for like all or nothing kind of a fight, or are you guys just going to go? We can compromise, because if we don't, and these companies, they go away, a lot of members of ours are going to lose our livelihood. There's a potential of that, because if everybody became employees, there's a potential these companies go to zero. Because they're not, according to them, they're not making money, which I believe they're not, because their business model is garbage. But that's besides the point. That's their problem with all their Wharton MBAs. They haven't figured it out yet. But although this latest scheme of double algos, I think that they're on their way to profitability. So is that the game we should be playing? Like destroy the world, like kill everything? Because I'm telling you, it's the new world. It's the gig economy. People want to participate in it. 1 out of 6 Americans do it. Why should we destroy something? Maybe we should negotiate, Nicole.
Well, there's your false equivalency that destroying the world is having labor rights. That's not true. It's actually
I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's true. But what I'm saying is, is there any way to compromise?
There's a lot of ways to negotiate a contract, but what you don't do is you don't give away the house when you're trying to buy a refrigerator, right? Because you're not going to have any place to put it. So I'm just saying, there's things that Dara doesn't want to change on, but guess what? Labor rights are something that when I look at my kid who's 14 years old right now, and I look at what is the future going to be like for her, if all of a sudden the majority of jobs in our country aren't covered by basic things like unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, paid time off for when you're sick or when you have a kid. When I look at that and I say, oh, well, it's okay to just like give a sixth of the economy second-class rights, I'm just not for that. And I don't think that anybody in our shoes should be thinking that that's the right way to go. I mean, they're looking at apping healthcare jobs right now. They're looking at apping, high-paid construction jobs right now. And if we end up in a place where we're saying there's no labor rights for these folks, we're going to be in trouble. So I say, that's kind of, it's not an all or nothing, because I believe there's a lot of places to go. For instance, where New York City is, where the regulation in Seattle was before they gave up the labor rights with the state legislation. I think there's a lot of good places to go where we can find better rates, where we can find better protections, including stuff like due process and just cause for deactivation. So, no, I'm not there for all or nothing, but I don't think any of us would be in a good place giving up labor rights.
Do you think,
using the analogy of giving up your house to get the refrigerator, we never had the house in the first place, and no one's ever had the house. The first place someone ever tried to build a house was California, and the first thing they did was go Prop 22 on you, and that is something they were holding over our head in Washington State as well. And while it's nice to have the ideal world, in the real world, people are struggling. People are trying to stay alive and feed their families. And the employment fight referendum issue is not one that we can easily win on multiple points. A, we don't have the money that these companies have to throw to that. Why? Because they're stealing our passengers' money to spend millions and millions of dollars to keep us screwed. So we don't have the resources, number one. And number two, even if we had the same amount of money to spend, our argument is not as easy as theirs. It takes 8 seconds for them to put an ad up there and engage fear. Do you want your fares to go up? Da, da, da. Ah! And people just run for the hills. No, we want cheap fares. The argument that we have to make is more nuanced. It takes longer. We have to talk about issues of sustainability, and you want things to be cheap, but if the system doesn't work, then it works for nobody. But that argument is much more expensive when it comes to Super Bowl time, and when you're trying to get the point across. So that's not likely a fight we can win. And instead of trying to take on a fight that we were very, very, very likely to lose, like we lost in California, instead we're trying to figure out how can we give ourselves a different option than the false dichotomy that the companies are giving us of take it or leave it. And they're saying, well, you have a choice. You can choose to ride for less or choose to ride for nothing. And well, no, it's not take it or leave it. We can take it, leave it, or change it. And in Seattle, we're changing it. And we haven't gotten it perfect. And we have a lot more room for growth, but we're establishing a beachhead of regulation, which is sustainable, not just for the companies, and the companies need to be able to stay alive, or something else hopefully will come and take their place, but it also has to be sustainable for the drivers, because we can't keep Uber and Lyft in business on the backs of those of us who can't get venture capitalist funding for 10 years, on the backs of those of us who have to actually pay our bills week in, week out, and when our car breaks and we have to get a new one, and we've got to be able to have enough money to make that transition.
Okay. I mean, I you know what, Walt, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think that's my observation in all of this as well. I don't want these companies to go away. Look, I mean, I think, but Nicole has a point, right? I mean, especially if the federal law that's passed, that flex law that they're trying to shop around now, everything is going to change. I mean, a guy, Google is working with that now, and a lot of big companies are pushing for that law to become law, a federal law that, even if you get hired at a $500,000 coder job, and you're going to be an independent contractor, you're not going to be an employee. And then look, I think what you guys did, honestly, I'm moving to Seattle, Walt, so we're going to see. By the way, do they cap you? Do they cap the driver count?
There are no caps on drivers right now. They're actively recruiting.
Okay, how about this? Do you see a demand?
Come on now.
Do you see a demand? I'm coming up. I'm serious. $1.50 a mile and 65 cents a minute. You're swimming in cash. Okay, so
yeah.
No.
Yeah,
But,
it's difficult to judge what effects the demands have had because COVID has changed all the marketplace. And Seattle is a city that has a lot of tech workers, and a lot of them are disproportionately able to work from home. So the city of Seattle is recovering differently than a lot of other cities. San Francisco is another one like that.
Yeah.
But as far as getting enough rides and being able to make comparable or better money for the same amount of hours, it's now easier to make the same amount of money on fewer hours. And, as long as you know where to go, you're not going to have an issue. Now, if I want to just sit at my home out in the suburbs and hope that maybe it'll ping, then you might have an issue. But for those of us who actually know the neighborhoods, we're not having any problems. I mean, the number of rides taken has actually gone up. The one thing I wish we had was more transparency on both the drivers and the passengers side, because the passengers, every time Uber and Lyft have to pay anything more, if our rates go up by 30%, they're going to raise the passengers' fare by 50%, which is exactly what happened here. And so our tips get affected by passengers who think we're making lots of money when we're actually not. Uber and Lyft are using the surge pricing as a profit source.
right. No, I agree with all that. But you know what it is, though? On base, right? Base rates. We're talking apples to apples. I mean, the same rules apply in LA. I'm sure Tyler will agree with that. If you know your city's rhythm, if you know where to be, when to be, you're going to make more money than the average driver. I mean, that's it. You have to have a strategy. You can't just willy-nilly go accept every single garbage trip that they send you. So if you do that, then you're toast. I mean, what do you want me to say?
Yeah.
But in your case, though, I don't even see, one negative maybe that you guys don't see where the passengers are going. But in your case, with your rates and on base rates, pretty much every trip is reasonably profitable for you. I mean, that's all I'm saying, right? I mean, you don't even
if it's
have
a short trip or a long trip,
cherry picking game. You just kind of go accept. Okay, I'll accept $1.50 a mile and 60 cents or whatever a minute. I'm profitable.
Even if it's a long trip out into the middle of nowhere, I'm getting paid enough to get there that it's fine that I'm deadheading back.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a huge plus for me. So okay, like I said, we're gonna cut it out, but I know Nicole is like, you're still employed, right?
I haven't got any text saying I'm fired yet.
Okay. So let's do like I'll give you like as much time as you want. Give me like a closing statement, because we cannot resolve this here, obviously, but I hope some people are watching this, which I'm pretty sure they are. And to me, is like the most important thing is there are models that are acceptable to a lot of drivers that I speak to, truly, because when they tell me their rates and even this, with this new upfront pricing schemes, I see some screenshots, 150-mile trips for $80 in like 3 hours. I go like, what the heck is wrong with this picture, man? This is bad. Like if I was in Seattle, that trip would be like $300. So let's go with Brian. Let's go with you. What can we do here to educate drivers? Number one, right? Mm-hmm. Which is to me the most important thing, which I'm pretty sure RDU is doing a good job at it. And two, can we come to a compromise that we keep the industry alive but obviously look out for the driver as well?
So I'll take the second part first, and I'll say, for the entire, history that we've had businesses, they've said if workers form a union, it's going to throw everything under the bus and everything's going to collapse, and we can't function that way. So I don't see why Uber or other gig companies are different in that respect, right? We've had unions; they have made the improvements to a large extent, like the things that Walt is talking about, right? Even to have regulations on businesses and in favor of workers, that's because unions have fought for them. And so what we're fighting for at RDU is an independent driver-led organization that can, as Nicole said, ultimately sit down with these companies and negotiate, which means there is going to be a give and take. Nobody is saying all or nothing, right? But one of the things that is not compromisable for us are A, labor rights, and B, the idea of an independent organization that is not part of Uber and that's built from workers from the ground up. So in doing that, I think that's how we educate drivers. Being part of RDU, that's what I see all the time, is drivers having conversations and talking about the challenges that they face on the road, talking about the frustrations in their lives because of the way that these companies operate, and developing strategies to change them. And so that's why we did the study, right? Is, we had 55 drivers come together and say, we're going to share our data and see how we're actually functioning under Prop 22. And then we did the analysis and we talked about it, right? And, and thank you for letting us have this time on the show to talk to even more people.
We appreciate it. I mean, to me, it's like, I think what your study did was, wake up a lot of people, because, it's such a number that people go like, huh, 620. I'm like, yeah. For most people who say, oh, that's bogus, it's not right or whatever. Look, you did your numbers. You admitted this $26.30 was the gross, right? On average for these drivers. Okay, I know these drivers probably were all RDU members. I don't know if they cherry picked, if they accepted every trip, which Tyler can answer that. But you found $19 and change in deductions, okay, to take it to $6.20. Now, some people may look at it and say, well, they're not valid, this and that. But again, it's one study, it's one group of people, it's a certain amount of trips done over a certain period of time. And the same people who laugh at that study should also laugh at every Uber study that comes, because look, if you're paying for a study, the study results better be to your favor, because you can skew the results anything you look. I can bring out a study to say, you guys are making $65 an hour. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it's like, I'm actually glad that you did the study and then brought it to light. So we're going to have this conversation. So Tyler, what do you say? I mean, I know you're part-time now, used to be full-time. And the reason you're part-time now is because you're getting paid less. I'm pretty sure, right?
Oh, yeah. Scheduling's different. My kid's different. I have a every other weekend thing, but back to what your question is, I would actually, let's say, I feel like a lot of people are probably going to be on the chat talking crap, because I feel like I would have.
I'm not paying any attention to that at all.
Oh, no. I'm just saying in general, that's what they're going to do with the 620. But my thing is, I'd love to challenge all of those drivers, sign up for driver's seat and show me that screenshot of your online hours and let the algorithm tell you the truth. And then sign up for RDU if you want to come talk some smack, because we're there to listen all the time. We get in our groups, we talk about it. At the end, let's talk about what happened through your day that day, or what experience you want to talk about.
Yeah, I agree.
When I hit those numbers, I'm kind of like you, Sergio. I was up there. I was like, yeah, those are my numbers. What's up? I can teach you how to do it. I've replicated it by teaching other drivers how to do it. But then looking at these numbers, the true numbers, I'm like, oh, I was not up there. I mean, like I said, I already do my own math, my own Excel sheet. But honestly, everyone else, it's like, go for it, test it, try it.
And that's the key. We have to organize.
I talk to a lot of drivers. They all, what they do is they all put out their best 3 hours of a week, and then they go, "Oh, I made." I'm like, you didn't. No, you didn't. No. Because if I can't make it, you're not gonna make it. I mean, I'm top driver in LA. If I cannot squeeze $30 an hour, gross, you're not gonna do it either, because you don't know half of what I know. But that's the problem here. The biggest, 620 may not be reality for a lot of people, right? But then when they hear 620, they go, oh no, I make a lot more than that. I go, well, did you even pay attention to what your deductions are? Maybe you are there. Maybe you're, because I'm telling you this, a lot of big city drivers are making decent money today. Okay. San Francisco, LA, maybe they're squeezing $30-$40 an hour. But, you have a lot of cities in the country. San Antonio's, Florida is horrible right now. They're making 12, 16, 18, $20 online hour before expenses. I'm like, you guys should be doing something else. You guys should not be doing this. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, it is. But then they're sold into this. I'm flexible. I'm free. I'm doing this. I don't care if I'm losing money. I'm like, okay, go subsidize Uber and Lyft. So, Walt, I'll give you the next word, because ladies always go last.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Tyler was saying, is we have to be able to organize and reach more drivers so that we can help people both understand and also learn from the thousands of us who are out there, because each of us have a different experience. And by bringing those in, we understand where are the next fights? What do we need to try to get for next? Because nothing is going to be perfect. The thing we have in Seattle is not perfect. New York's not perfect. And Lord knows Los Angeles is far from perfect. And so how are we going to prioritize what we do next requires listening to drivers and figuring out what counts and trying to find ways to get the higher pay, to get the greater protection, the deactivation protections, to get the benefits that we can if we work through the existing systems that we have. And if going the employment route is the way to go, then sure, fine. There are many different ways to get to the same result, but it's all about trying to make sure we're sustainable.
Okay. All right. And Nicole, close us up.
Yeah, I think everybody here did a really great job talking about this issue. I think we need to be real about why are these companies trying to change labor law? What's really in it for them? Who's putting the money into these companies and really not getting anything back yet? Like the big investors. Why are they doing that? We know that the big CEOs like Dara and the heads of the big companies have made huge raises in our country over the last, decade. And we're actually going backwards. And what we're doing right now as drivers is part of that going backwards. We have to move forward together. We want, and I think we, couldn't agree with Walt more. We got to organize, right? But I think we have to realize that all of us are going to have to fight for, real contracts. And, we're going to have to do it with labor rights. That's where I'm at. And we can only do it by building power. And all we got is each other.
There's definitely power in numbers. We know that. So the unfortunate thing is most Uber and Lyft drivers or gig workers don't last that long, which is sad, because of a lot of people that just start this, don't go to the end. Like Walt has for 7 years, or Tyler has for 8 years, or like me for 7 years. But then, I think look, doing these things is so really, really helpful to everybody. I mean, there are strong opinions on one end, and obviously there are strong opinions on the other end, but does not mean, we have the scorched earth policy. We just kind of go, we got to compromise. We need them as much. Well, we need them to a point, but they need us more, because without drivers, people, there is no gig economy. Okay. You got to admit that. Mm-hmm. Any CEO that's watching or whoever's watching, no gig, no, you don't have my car, you're not getting your burrito. You don't have my car.
I tell my customers,
you're not going to LA.
You can sit on your phone all you want. The app ain't going to get you home.
You betcha. Well, you know what? Maybe they'll create something like that. Zoom in, Scotty kind of a thing. You know what I mean? So, anyway, you know what? I thank you, all of you, to be here. It probably went a little longer than we should have, but it's an important subject. We're definitely going to keep following up with you guys, and I'm always in touch with Nicole, so she's going to let me know what the good news is one of these days. They go like, "Hey man,
that's right.
Rate went to $1.50 a mile and 70 cents a minute." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm driving tomorrow."
Right on.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thumbs up,
guys.
All right, yes. All right, Sergio, are we still doing more, or are we ending this too?
We're going to do our Walt. You want to stay on?
Oh, well, I like to figure out what's going on in the background.
I don't know why you're staying on. You're making you're swimming in cash. You're swimming in cash. What the heck, man? I'm jealous.
For sure. All right, so we are still on. So before we're going to wrap this up just in a few moments, but Walt, if you want to hold on a second. Sergio, I want to hear what your thoughts are after listening to what Seattle base is, what RDU's stance is. What's your thoughts overall? And then if you were on the negotiating side,
a great question, man. Let me tell you, I'm not of the policy of, I want to compromise, because honestly, it's a new world. It's, we can't go back already. I mean, the what do you call it? The horse is out of the barn, the cat's out of the bag, or whatever. We can't stick it back in.
Yeah.
So RDU seems to me like they're a little too hell bent on sticking the cat back in the bag, which I'm like, okay, but but I bet you if they were on the negotiating table, I think the attitudes would change, because 20,000 members seriously will lose their livelihood if Uber and Lyft go under. Again, to me, what you guys did, Walt, okay, because you know what, I knew you were coming on today, so I went back. Actually, Harry interviewed a couple of legislatures or people who work in the government who facilitated this for the Seattle drivers, who started the studies 9 months ago. Harry interviewed these people, and I watched that interview twice yesterday. And you know, you know, they were both like kind of suspicious, or not even suspicious, but nervous about what's about to take place. And they said, we'd love to come on and see how the changes have been over the last year. Well, it's almost a year since that interview. Honestly, man, I honestly don't see anything wrong with what you guys have. I know RDU is hell-bent on labor rights. Yes, you guys gave up your rights to unionize to a point, but you stayed IC. You can turn your app on anytime you want. You got the highest rates in the country by far, by a mile. You got a lot of protection. You got protection for unjust deactivations. I think these are good things for drivers. If you told this to, I'm telling you, Chris, what do you think? We should run a poll. If rates were $1.50 a mile, 65 cents a minute, you got protection from unjust deactivation, you got sick time, so you got sick time or paid time off, you know, you can go on anytime you want. Well, you know what the result of the poll would be? 100%. 100% would say, yes, we want that.
You know what? We'll design that poll. So everybody who's watching right now, you know, stay tuned for that poll. That we'll work on that maybe over the rest, like the next hour or so, and then post it probably tomorrow, just to see what people are saying. For me personally, look, the issue is we have this end goal in mind, and drivers have so many different reasons why they're started. For me personally, I had it. Why I drive now is much different than why I started, even in between. For you, it's different. For, you know, we had Driven Mom on last week and Driven Dad. They have a whole different story on why they're driving. And, you know, then there's other people who are driving to and from work, maybe to make extra money. Maybe they want to go on vacation. Maybe because of inflation and how crazy it's been over the last couple of months, they started driving because they have to offset so they can still survive.
Yeah.
So a lot of drivers in that boat or in some of these boats, one might not necessarily care when it comes to driver protections or labor protections, as long as they're making the money, even if they're not looking at, you know, how much costs are associated with driving. Maybe they're just looking at gas. And then, you know, if you're doing an hour before and after work, or if you're doing, you know, Friday night for a few hours or Saturday for a few hours, you're not putting the same wear and tear on your car. So your car can elongate out much longer in terms of that. So your cost to run is going to be much different than a driver who's driving, you know, 60, 70, 80 hours. They're saying, we want blanketed, we want everybody to have employee status. Well, that you can look at it as one avenue, one way to look at it. Sure, that might work for certain drivers, but for other drivers like Driven Mom, Driven Dad, you know, myself, other people, something like that would not work it. And the other thing too is when it talks about schedule, well, I go on Uber and Lyft at the same time. If I go on during the day, I throw Spark on that too, because I'm multi-apping. Every time I have multiple apps on at the same time, I increase my chances at getting some sort of paying gig that I'm out there making money versus sitting in my car waiting for something to come in. So let's be real. If you become an employee for Uber or Lyft, you will not be able to go online multi-app the same way at all. It's impossible.
You know, you're so 100% right on that, because if tomorrow I became an Uber employee, right, there is not a chance on the planet the app is going to allow me to get on Lyft or DoorDash or anything else. I'm tied up to you, okay? Mm-hmm. So, and you know, perfectly said, Chris, that last week we had a couple on, and Walt, please go watch that episode. It's an amazing episode. They're a couple. They both do the gig economy. They both drive rental Teslas. They have 5 kids who they homeschool. If they were not involved in the gig economy, in what world, or if they were both W-2s, right? How's that going to happen? It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So lives are changing. Thought processes are changing. I mean, look, I'm not against unions, but we know what's the history of unions in this country. Union membership has been on a decline for the last 40 years, right? I mean, granted, corporations have stuff to do with it. I get you. But then with the technology, with the new economy, we need to move with the times. But honestly, man, I congratulate you guys in Seattle, because I swear to God, there is not a goddamn thing wrong with what you guys did there. Yeah, you gave up your employment rights. Big effing deal. Okay. Now, the reason for that is
most of these rights are things we've never had.
Yeah.
So what we did was we created rights.
Was perfect. Yep. You didn't have the house anyway, right? And you were never an employee. So why are you asking for an employee rights? You're not an employee anyway. But my thing is, what you guys did, come to the table, bring this, because these guys do the same thing, by the way, in every state, right? They bluff. They go, oh, we're going to leave. I'm like, they did the same thing in California. We'll leave. I'm like, California is 25% of your revenue. Your company will go to zero if you leave California. You know what I'm saying? So
didn't they say though that they can make any model work?
Well, they also promised in City Hall that if we passed the Fair Share Act, the cats and dogs would be sleeping together and the world was going to end. And lo and behold, the Fair Share Act's now been around for a couple of years, and it's just been good for everybody. Yes, passengers might have to pay a little bit more, but there are no free rides here. If their business model was based on providing a good at below cost, well, eventually we have to provide the good at cost. Otherwise, how are we going to stay in business?
Yeah. Well, the below cost initially was the VC money, right? Initially, below cost VC money. Then below cost was driver cars, equities, right? And now
it's just have us eat it.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it's like, hey, man, honestly, win-win-win in Seattle, Tacoma, or state of Washington. Reasonably,
for Tacoma, it's night and day.
Huh?
For Tacoma, it's going to be night and day. I mean, I was just down there the other night, and because I had a ride down to the Sir John Elton concert, and it was like Elton John, whatever. Once I'm in there, I had to just turn it off and come back up, because even if I was in a surge area, and that's the only way they can keep people alive is by having surge areas. If I go more than like 7 minutes, the base rates in Seattle will eat up a $5 surge in a heartbeat. And so the Tacoma drivers were making like 11 cents a minute and 80 cents a mile, which is just, it's not sustainable around here.
Yeah. I mean, but look where they're going up to, though, right? So to me, I think you got to bring these guys to the table somehow. And everybody has this opinion of that. It's either win at all costs. No, Uber doesn't want to disappear. Trust me, they don't want to disappear. I mean, everybody thinks like, oh, they're Darth Vader. I'm like, no, man, they're not. Look, I do articles on drivers who are successful in their own cities. I'm going to do one is coming out that's in Chicago, right? These drivers are brilliant. They figured out the system even with low rates. They're making what they're making, but they're working their asses off. And a lot of people are of the opinion of like, I'm just going to sit here and then collect money. I'm like, there's no freebies in this world, man. But what you guys did was, a happy medium for everybody. Passengers are paying more. Is Uber still there? Business is still existing. You guys are making more money. To me, it's like, I don't see why not the exact model, but a variation of this model cannot be applied city by city, because your cost of living expenses are higher than, let's say, maybe Idaho or whatever, right? But again, this kind of model with 80% of employment rights with higher rates is a sustainable model, because otherwise this blow everything up and it's not going to work for anybody.
And it's not perfect, but we can still continue to fight and get even more and gain more protections now that we have a beachhead, if you will.
All right, so Walt, I got something for you. Already, you've increased your per mile rates to an extraordinary amount, which is where it used to be. So as Nicole said, we're going backwards, which we all are. We can agree to that. But you guys are bringing it.
Well,
back.
Actually, now we're going forward. We have cost of living increases,
and that's where I was going to go. You got your unjust deactivations. You got your paid time, or you could call it whatever you want to call it, paid time off, sick time, however you got to use it, or whatever it might be. When it comes down to it, what more do you think that Seattle or Washington could do to make it even better? Because you keep saying there's more improvements that could be made. Well, what other improvements out there? Because honestly, to me, like Sergio, I agree with that model. It still gives you that that freedom and flexibility of when and where you want to go on, even though, yeah, there could be some manipulation behind the times, as we've talked about on today's show even. But what else could be improved upon to make it better for drivers, where it's still staying that same model? So people like the rideshare mom, the rideshare, driven mom, driven dad, myself, Sergio, other drivers, you know, full-time drivers, part-time drivers, one-off drivers. How can that make it better for them?
Well, a couple areas. In transparency, again, so that people understand exactly what it is we're making, and then that would help in tips. It's very difficult to get a tip from a passenger that paid $150 who would probably be tipping you $20 if they realized that you were only making 65 or 70 or 80 of that $150. But if in their mind they're thinking you're making 120 of that 150, well then I don't need to tip you. You got taken care of. So the transparency on both sides is something that I believe we need to fight for, and a lot of drivers agree here. Another area that's big is that, you know, drivers who are doing XL or doing Uber Black aren't really gaining the benefits of this. Yes, Uber and Lyft have adjusted their rates up so that they're higher than the new minimums that they have to pay for Uber X, but it's still not really able to make up for the fact that their $80,000 car is costing them a lot more than my $30,000 car. So
yeah, but Walt,
you know,
I mean, you know, but Walt, when it comes to that tipping issue, right? You know, the fares in the country, I mean, I look at studies that have gone up 30 to 70% nationwide. Okay. So just the fact that your rates are better, because at 60 cents a mile, 21 cents a minute, the passenger that gets in my car is not tipping me because Uber has raised the rates on them 60% anyway. But at least you're getting
we all need this.
I'm getting none of it. And then the passenger thinks I'm swimming in cash. I'm like, no, sir, I'm not swimming in cash. Uber is taking a whole bunch of it. But at least you're seeing some benefit of your higher rates.
Yeah, but what about the outrage you could see where you see Uber is making X price, driver is getting paid Y price, and there's that difference in there of their take? How irate do you think a rider would actually be seeing like something like that? So let's say that trip that I sent you earlier, that 150-mile trip that they offered $80. What do you think that rider paid for that ride? That was probably a $200+ ride, easily. Yeah. And that, so you see that if you're a rider and you see I'm paying $200, but my driver is only making, you know, $86 on this ride, how mad do you think they would get?
Well, that's the outrage that we need people to see, so that we can get the political clout to change these things. Because as long as people think that it's you know, oh my gosh, I can't pay those drivers more because then my fares will go crazy. Well, no, the fares are crazy because Uber and Lyft are robbing you blind and not paying us any money. So, you know, again, we need to make it sustainable for all of us.
Yeah. No, I you know what? I agree. Appreciate you coming on, man. I mean, you know, I think a lot of people are going to move to Seattle. See, there's one guy right there that says, I'm moving to Seattle. So, no, I mean,
you know, you have good scenery.
Hey, man, you can't beat that. Great weather. Look at the air, fresh air. We got
a lot of smoke right now. Wildfires are blowing this way.
Are they? Okay. Well, you know what? We both thank you for coming on and spending an hour and a half or a couple with us. You know, I'm definitely going to keep in touch with you, obviously, because I've been looking for a Seattle driver for the longest time, and I'm like, nobody was coming forward, and then I found you. I'm like, boom, there you go. I have a good friend in LA. He drives a Tesla, he kills it, makes three grand a week, and he goes, "Wait, Walt, you got a spare bedroom?" We Zoom.
I mean, think about the rates that you're getting paid in LA, and then take that into the rates that you make in Seattle. How much would you make at that point then?
Oh, well, no, but it's not the same market. But that's not the issue. But okay, so we Zoom. He drives in his Tesla Lyft Lux. Okay, that's like the top category. He's not getting paid your miles and minutes. He's not getting paid your miles and minutes for an X.
Now that being said, I mean, I talked to folks down in Vegas, and they don't even know what their miles and minutes are, but they know they're making lots of money because there's all these surges going on. Yeah. But having to chase a surge, especially on the Uber app, where the only possible way to actually get the advertised surge price is to turn the app off, drive way out of your way to the middle of the thing, turn it on, and hope that because now you're there, they don't lower it.
Yeah,
because your existence says, oh, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah,
so it's a big game that's stacked against us. And to have to rely on that game that keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking how much we get of that surge is, again, it's not sustainable. It might be good right now, but they're squeezing you and you won't even know it because you have no idea why you're making less and less year after year, week after week. And we've got to find a way to actually start to make more and more. People in the employment world, they're like, oh my gosh, we're falling behind because our wages have stayed stagnant. We haven't gotten a raise in 10 years. Well, yeah, try taking a pay cut year after year after year. Every time Uber and Lyft gave us, hey, we listen to drivers like you, and we wanted to help you make more money. So here it is. And this new thing would come, and you're like, oh, not again. Because every time it meant we're making I was like, did we really ask for less money?
Yeah, but you know what? They always say, the more you drive, the more you make. You'll be easier than ever.
But we're going to take something away. And that's the same thing with upfront earnings. So we've got so many screenshots that people are sending. So even just looking on, different driver forums and Facebook groups and things like that, from what we've been able to see, and the tests that we're actually going to try to run too, to see how upfront earnings actually is, because they say they're giving you more transparency, but in actuality they are not, because you in Washington you have two different, you have A, B, and you're going to get that no matter what, whether the ride is 2 blocks, whether the ride is across the state. The rest of the country has this rate rebalancing where now we're going to give you a little bit more up front for a short ride, but we're going to really take away on the long end. So if you have a longer trip, you're going to get paid less. When in fact, that doesn't even make any sense. And then the time and distance is coupled. And no, time and distance from getting paid. You could come with many different.
You're getting cut off, Chris.
And
Chris,
say,
you're getting cut off.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Where I lose out on.
Well, Walt, I got this one final question. Actually, the math dawned on me now. You said how many cents a minute?
What was it
65?
64?
64. Okay, whatever.
64 sounds about right.
$38.40 a minute, an hour.
38.50.
38.40. If you have somebody
64,
in the car.
Yep.
Yeah, if
64.
If you have somebody in the car about halftime, it's 18 on just time alone.
38.40. Okay, that's 38.40 times 60 is 38.40. So even if you even if your utilization rate is half the time, meaning you're sitting down half the time, you don't have an ass in the car, right? Half of
$18
that
on time alone.
$19.20, which is minimum wage plus anyway. See what I mean? That's what they did. That's exactly what they did. God damn, that's so good.
Well, that's the thing too. What are the top 3 things that drivers always talk about? Pay, motivations, and a couple other things that they've included in with it. So you raise that pay rate, how many drivers are much happier? The whole thing is, they had the 80-20 split, they went to the 75-25 split. Then they went to the time and distance model, which I don't even agree with to begin with. I like the splits because, Walt, I think you said this earlier. You said something about if you have a quest bonus, a promotion, and you don't achieve it, you're not going to make that bonus. That bonus could be, let's say, $300 for 50 rides. If you only give 46 because you have other things that are going on during that time frame, now you just lost $300. But if you take the total of what you'd make on the 80-20 or 75-25 split, you take it to here. That's the pay cut, and then this leftover was what the promotions and bonus are. Get rid of those bonuses and promotions. Give me back the split of what it was. I'll be much happier that way. Give me the rates that it was. I would be so much happier that way.
You know what? You guys did it right in Seattle. I'm all for the same model, different variations in different cities. Honestly, that's it.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, hey man, this is not brain surgery. We're just driving people from point A to point B. Okay. Number one, let's not take it that seriously. However, we have the passengers' lives in our hands, so pay me something that's worth my time, as opposed to, people go, oh, I make $30 an hour. Yeah, you make $30 an hour for 2 hours from midnight to 2 a.m. in LA in bar rush. And then what about the rest of the time? What about the rest of the time? So I'm not buying the RDU thing. Look, I'm not buying
a lot of people just don't drive the rest of the time. They just cherry pick the good hours.
Yeah.
But the system requires we have people out there all the time.
There are less and less of those hours because with the economy the way it is, we have an oversaturation of drivers. We're splitting the pie a lot more thinner now. There's many different issues. But I'm not buying the 620 in RDU numbers, honestly, because that's like adding every single benefit you may or may not have to take you down to 620. But truly, a lot of drivers are driving for like $8-10 an hour. They don't even know it. Because if you're grossing $20 an hour, you don't even know you're driving at $12 an hour, and that's it. Might as well go stand at Target for 18. I'm telling you, that's it.
Well, we can nitpick about the little small things and whether or not it's going to help them from a PR standpoint to include every single little thing, like the 10-minute break every 4 hours, which clearly you don't need, because if you're working really, really hard, you just turn it off. I'm making lots of money, but however, that low number, if it's going to wake people up to, oh my gosh, there is a big problem here, then that's a good thing. The downside is it can cause people to say, well, you guys are full of crap, if we're including a whole lot of stuff that a lot of people think aren't absolutely critically necessary, when really, even with just the critical depreciation of the car, you're still not making minimum wage.
Yep.
You're still not even coming close to minimum wage.
Look, the vast majority want to stay independent contractors. And, I'm not going to call all these people idiots, okay? It's just not possible. I mean, look, people like the freedom, people like the flexibility. It may not be what they think it is. However, this new model has to work for everybody, and you guys created a system, I think, honestly, sustainably can work for all three sides. That's it. And
so far it's working, and we're going to continue to press to make it better and make it more sustainable for everybody, really. And that's.
I think you're the only people in the country, including regular employees, that got a 7% or 8% increase for adjusted to inflation, right? I don't think a regular employee got an 8% adjustment, and I don't think any driver anywhere in the country got an adjustment because of inflation. I don't think they did.
I am looking forward to January 1st.
Oh my God, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Anyway, thank you all. We appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Cool. You guys have a great one.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks.
I'm already be in touch with you. I'm on your next now. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up now. Thank you everybody for watching, hanging out, having a good time. Especially seeing a couple of different sides of the coin. Thank you again for watching. The audio podcast might not be available tomorrow if you want to listen, only because I'm not in town. As you can see behind me, I am in Vermont right now, so that is an enjoyable little couple of days to enjoy. But with that being said, thank you. Smash that like button. We had 140 people in right now. We got I think we had 180 or something. So smash that like button. And also, we just want to say thanks again to everybody who did come on to kind of give their viewpoints, their thoughts. And then, I was watching the chat a lot because I was kind of saying things broke up when it came to here. Watching the comments, so many people are saying there's there's a lot of things there. There's a lot of thank you for sharing your opinions as well in the chat. And this is something that we're going to obviously be talking about continuing on, especially with this 45-day input period when it comes to the U.S. Labor Department with their proposed rule change and all that. So this is something that's going to be happening here and now that we're going to be talking about quite a bit. But when it comes to some other things coming up on the show, we have a lot of things coming. Today was a very special show, having these couple of different ideas and thoughts when it comes to where do we go from here. The current model, let's be real, works, but it could be much, much, much better. It's not something that is it's hanging on by the thread, and that's really it. Once that thread breaks, the system will fail. And we don't want that. We don't want to see that, because drivers' livelihoods are at stake when it comes to this. There's quite a few people with that. So, so apologies for if I cut out at all that somebody said what I say. But
you did.
With that being said, you guys have what?
You did. You cut out all the time. I was like, God damn. Out of all weeks, he had to go to Vermont this week. I'm like, shit.
It was one of those last minute things. So,
hey, man.
All right. Well, you guys have a good rest of your day. Enjoy. Go out there and make that money. And stay tuned for next week. We have a really show coming up next week as well, too. All right.
Bye, everybody.
And we will see you.